I was governor of Minnesota, we did a massive study on voter fraud, and it isn't there. It's a red herring. There isn't any massive voter fraud that goes on. So why the need to fix everything and why to do all these things? I don't know. I think it's to disenfranchise people and stop people and making voting difficult, which it should not be. The only voter fraud you're going to see will come from these electronic voting machines, where the fraud can be done with massive amounts of numbers. That's what you have to watch out for. There's no criminals out there every November when voting comes around saying, let's organize people and send hundreds to the polls to commit voter fraud. I mean, that's laughable. You know, but that's it's totally a red herring that they throw out there for the reason they just want to make voting more difficult, because the more difficult they make voting means less people vote, and it's that simple. Smaller numbers are easier to control.
Absolutely amazing point. If we only focus just as much on election fraud than voting fraud, which is the real issue here, and Greg Palast just did a 6-month investigation at Al Jazeera, basically found that GOP-led efforts to purge voter rolls basically will disenfranchise up to 3.5 million people for things that, like being registered in 2 different states at once. I mean, that's a common occurrence if someone moves. It's not a real indication of fraud here. Jesse, how do you think this purge will affect independent candidates for the midterms?
Well, all independent candidates in this country don't have a chance anyway, because the two parties make the rules. You know, they never get along with each other, except when it comes time to crush down any third entity. Then they will team up together and be the best of buddies at that point. But I stand now, Abby, we have to change everything in this country. We need to abolish political parties altogether. Get rid of them. Make them political action committees. And you know how you could start? You could start at the local level, because I always pose this question. Why do we put political parties on the ballot? Why not just the candidate's name?
Yeah,
There's no reason, you know, and that way the voter has to educate themselves. What does John Smith stand for? See, now they make it so it's for the parties. If you're liberal, you walk in and look for Democrat. You don't need to know who it is. You look for Democrat. If you're conservative, you look for Republican. You don't even need to know who the candidate is. Let's remove political parties and just put candidates' names down. Then it forces the people to educate themselves, or they have to simply go eeny, meeny, miny, mo, which I would rather have that. I would rather have that than the current state of our politics in America today, with these political action committees and the buying and selling and these. How about these despicable ads, Abby?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
I mean, I watch these TV ads. They make me want to throw up. You'd think the opponent should be put in prison. Well, being it's a Democrat and Republican, that may be accurate. Maybe they both do belong in prison.
Right. You said it yourself, I mean, in your book. You know, it is absurd, Jesse, but I feel like, you know, this is talking about putting a lot of responsibility on voters, and I shudder to think if they had to actually take time to find out who the candidates really are. I have to bring up this recent poll, too. Yeah, go on.
Well, do you know why they need to? Here's why. If you're like me, I work 5 days a week, and the government takes 2 to 2.5 days of my pay. They take it in taxes. Half of my work. Isn't that compelling enough to make people pay attention? You've got this entity that takes 2.5 days of your 5 days' fruits of your labor. If you count property taxes, sales taxes, income taxes, taxes upon the taxes.
Yeah, Jesse, what kills me is people who say, oh, I'm just not political, you know, I'm not into that, as if it's a hobby like cars. And you're like, do you realize that everything you do on a daily basis is political? All of it's affected by what you could be participating in.
The government is in every facet of your life. You ought to pay attention to what they're doing with your money. I do, and that's why I'm called a rebel.
Yeah. You know, this recent poll, Jesse, it's going right along with what you're saying. It shows that 75% of working-class Americans feel they're being held back by the cost of living. 45% think they'll never get their finances back to how they were before the 2008 crisis. What do you think it will take to get the working class to become politically active if they're just focused on surviving day to day?
Well, the battle is this. They're destroying unions. Unions are being destroyed. And unions do have their faults. Anything can be corrupted. But the union created the middle class. And I've said this for decades now. As the unions go, so go the middle class, because that's the collective bargaining. You know, everybody talks about minimum wage, right? Minimum wage. I've come out on the other end. I've said we need to have a maximum wage. And it's, wait a minute, this isn't some socialist, communist idea Jesse Ventura's come up with. It's already implemented in professional sports. Every football, baseball, basketball, and hockey all have salary caps where the players can only make so much money. Now, they make a lot of money, but they can only make so much. It's capped off. It's time we bring salary caps to the CEOs of these corporations. And if somebody can't live on, say, $20 million a year, something's grossly wrong with them.
I think that that's a really, really great idea here. And of course, you have this corporate power structure that basically just outsources labor now. So it's almost like they don't need to invest resources in the actual workers that make up the backbone of this country. I wanted to move on to the Middle East. Of course, there's never a dull moment there with our Nobel Peace Prize winning president now having 7 predominantly Muslim countries being bombed under his belt. If Bush didn't wake people up, if the fact that another Bush might run isn't waking people up, and Obama's only exacerbated his policies, what in the hell is it going to take for people to wake up and not just continue to vote within the two-party system and just keep hoping for change?
Well, because they're ignorant fools. Can I put it any better? They don't pay attention. They think that if they switch parties, they're going to get a different policy. And clearly, we've all seen there's been no difference between the Bush foreign policy and the Obama foreign policy. They're identically the same. So until people, and I'm getting tired of saying this, but I'll keep it up. Until people stop voting for Democrats and Republicans, this is what you're going to get, because it's the same thing. You're not voting for a difference here. You're voting for the status quo if you vote for a Democrat or a Republican.
It's so true. And then we look at what happens, even Elizabeth Warren, Bernie Sanders, I mean, kind of capitulating to Israel because they're within that Democratic Party establishment. There's some things you just need to sell out on, Jesse.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I'll light the fire. I talked to Cynthia McKinney the other day, and she said she'd run with me if I ran.
Oh, my God.
Can you imagine her and I?
You guys would be a force to be reckoned with. You guys should do it, Jesse.
Well, Cynthia said to me she's in if I want to do it, and she's over right now in Bangladesh. When I spoke with her, guess what she's doing? She's in Bangladesh teaching political science. I said, Cynthia, get back here. We need it, not them.
Amazing duo right there, and I really think you should take that seriously, Jesse. You know, ISIS, of course, is dominating headlines right now. The latest, unbelievable, being reported that the group has obtained surface-to-air missiles. Jesse, how does this change the dynamics on the ground? How will this affect the current U.S. strategy over there?
Well, you know, the United States is now, something I saw on my show the other day really disturbed me a great deal. In fact, I made the statement that it makes me hang my head in shame as an American. And that was this survey that I saw, Gallup poll, I think it was, that throughout the world, 23 or 24% of the people think that if they're going to be attacked and war is going to be brought to them, it will be the United States doing it. I think Pakistan was next at 8% and China then at 6%. But the United States was more than double throughout the world. Now, in my lifetime, there was a time when the rest of the world used to look to the United States and want to be us. They wanted to become like the United States. Now, the rest of the world fears the United States, that we're going to be the one to bring them war. I think it's shameful, and I think that we need new leadership in this country that changes this war mentality that the United States of America has today.
It's really, really sick. And of course, we're fear-mongered here about Russia, about China, about all these different countries, when really that poll says it all, doesn't it? Who's the one with the big guns out there threatening everyone?
We are the United States of America, and I guess people here like it. I mean, I can't believe that their onslaught of publicity and propaganda over ISIS, they've convinced over half the people now that we need to go to war there. Boy, it'll be great. Dick Cheney and Halliburton will be making that much more money.
Because the first two wars in Iraq weren't enough.
Yeah, well, you know, I follow the teachings of Major General Smedley Butler, a Marine who won 2 Congressional Medals of Honor, and he wrote the great book, War is a Racket, about 100 years ago, where he explains how war is indeed that. It is a racket. I encourage people to make themselves intelligent. Read Smedley Butler's book. It should be mandatory reading for every high school senior. War is a racket.
It is indeed. And the U.S. did a weapons drop that literally landed into ISIS's hands, continues to arm so-called moderate rebels in Syria.
Well, we've switched sides over there so many times. Who has any idea who's who anymore? And yet they want to tell us this isn't Vietnam again? It patterns Vietnam perfectly.
There's no winnable strategy here. I mean, it's just more death, Jesse, more destabilization. And you know what? That I think is the end goal here, is just to destabilize these countries that are just not in the hands of U.S. hegemony, sadly. I mean, it's unreal.
Not just that. Not just that. It's there to feed the war machine. The war machine controls the U.S. economy now. I saw statistics the other day. 70% of our taxes go for 3 things. They go for Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, and defense spending, which is 29%. I say you could cut that to 10% easily, because we can blow up the world 100 times over. Who's going to attack the United States with the military capabilities that we have? No one.
Jesse, let's wrap it up. Of course, these ideas that you and I are talking about, they're becoming mainstream. I mean, people continue to be marginalized for questioning things, wanting to promote out-of-the-box ideas. What is your advice to people who want to fight back but can't just quit their jobs to become a full-time activist?
Well, what they need to do is be involved in any way they can locally. Let's start movements to get the political names off the ballots. We can do that, things like that at a local level. Get involved. The only way we can win our country back is at a grassroots level. It's not going to come from the top down, because the top down are the Democrats and Republicans.
Jesse Ventura, I really hope I see you on the ballot with Cynthia McKinney next to your name coming up soon. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank